Hi, my name's Stewart Lynch. Xcode 27, at least in beta, has arrived, and almost everything feels a little different. The toolbar has changed, previews work differently, themes are completely new, and there are several features that can improve your daily workflow. Here's everything you need to know before you start coding. If you're moving from Xcode 26, several familiar controls have moved, and projects start differently, errors look different, and Xcode 27 may not run on the Mac that you expect it to run on. So let's cover the changes you need before starting real work. First of all, you'll need to know that Xcode 27 requires Apple Silicon, and I'm running the current beta version, which requires macOS Tahoe 26.4 or later. It also includes Swift 6.4 and the Platform 27 SDKs. Now, Xcode 26 and 27 can coexist when installed on macOS versions that support both. And if you have installed macOS 27, as I have here on my laptop, you'll find that there is a problem running Xcode 26. But if you stay with me till the end of the video, I'll show you how you can still run Xcode 26 under macOS 27. You can run Xcode 27 on macOS 26, but I found that there are a couple of minor UI issues which may be beta issues and fixed by the time you watch this video. Another thing to note is that the command line tools can point to only one Xcode installation at a time. And don't accidentally adopt Platform 27 APIs in a production branch that may still build with Xcode 26. You may not be able to submit the application built with Xcode 27 until September, once this is out of beta. And I don't believe that you can even upload an app through the App Store Connect, even if you're able to run it under Xcode 26 under macOS 27. It must be compiled under macOS 26. First then, let's take a look at the redesigned toolbar. Let me overlay an Xcode 26 version of the toolbar on top of Xcode 27 so that you can see the differences. The back and forth history buttons are more obvious now, and have moved from the jump bar to the toolbar. There's a new conversation button for AI right alongside the scheme selector. In Xcode 26, you had code review and adjust editor option buttons on the same jump bar. Now in Xcode 27, there's a new group of edit controls. Those options that were all grouped into the button are now separated into two separate buttons to control how you want to organize your workspace. The first one will allow you to add editor tabs and editor panes. And the second gives you an opportunity to adjust the editor options. This is the button to show and hide the canvas. And this one shows and hides the assistant. Next up, we'll show your code review. And of course, you can show inspectors. Now, if you find that you're missing something or simply don't like what's on the toolbar, you can now customize it in Xcode 27. If you right-click on the toolbar, you can select Customize Toolbar. You can then add and remove items from the toolbar by dragging and dropping. For example, I can remove these three controls from the toolbar by dragging it off onto the palette. And then you can also add this library button, for example, onto the toolbar. And when you click Done, the toolbar is changed. Now I have fewer buttons, but one that I use more. Of course, if you want to get back to the default, you can just choose Customize again, and then drag the default toolbar back into place. I do like this library button though, so I'm going to add it on and confirm that is what I want. The controls for the preview canvas have changed once again in Xcode 27. Here's what they look like in Xcode 26. There were the live, selectable, and variant buttons on the left, then the device settings button, followed by the Preview Device selector in the center, and then followed by the Zoom buttons on the right, which were Zoom Out, Zoom to 100, Zoom to Fit, and Zoom In. Now in Xcode 27, the Live button is in the same place, but the device setting has moved all the way to the right. Selectable is still pretty close to the Live button, but there is a new button that's right in between, and that's a resizable button. Tapping this button allows you to resize the canvas to any dimension that you want, so that you can see what your app will look like on any size device, like the proposed folding iPhone, or an iPad with multiple views. The variant options are here too, and you can see what an app looks like in different color schemes, orientations, and for users who have altered the dynamic type. You get to see all versions all at once. I like the new center where you can control the zoom. And then, in addition, on the right, there is a new button that will export a screenshot of the canvas. So this might come in really handy. You could annotate the screenshot and then pass it on to AI for further analysis and improvement of your UI. I think this is going to be really useful. And then the next button is where you select your canvas device. In previous versions of Xcode, you could pin a canvas, and it would stay pinned and be viewable on any file that had a SwiftUI view. Well, in Xcode 27 now, pinned canvases are also viewable from any file, as you can see here for this model struct. When you build an app now, the build activity is displayed directly beneath the window title. And if you have multiple branches, the Get Branch Picker is now placed in the bottom bar at the right with more room to see long branch names. One of the most immediate noticeable changes in Xcode 27 is the new theming system. Previously, changing Xcode color scheme was primarily about the source editor. In Xcode 27, the theme can influence the entire workspace, including the navigator, inspectors, console, project settings, and the editor background. So let's see how this works. From the Xcode menu, you can choose Settings and then the Appearance tab. The new Appearance settings provide separate controls for the theme, fonts, and editor. And at the top, you can preview the theme using the System, Light, or Dark appearance. You can also choose from one of the predefined presets, or you can even import themes created by others. And notice that this changes Xcode itself. It doesn't change the colors of my SwiftUI application, its preview, or the running app in the simulator. Each theme is completely customizable. You can adjust foreground and background intensity and the colors, as well as any of the other colors for each of the Xcode components. You can change the font used, and you can choose the cursor style. Making changes on that Appearance tab in the settings sets the default for the entire workspace and for any new project that you create. But let me open this other project that I have here on my desktop. Notice that the theme here is entirely different from the last project. So how is that possible? Well, in Xcode 27, you can specify a specific theme for a project by choosing your theme from this menu here. So I'm going to choose Neon Noir. And now let me close the project. Now, if I go back and open that first project, I can still see that it has that green theme that I applied to it. If I open the other project now from the Open Recent menu, I see that the theme is the one that I selected for it. And this is fantastic, as I can use visual cues now to know which project I'm working on. So let me set this original project now back to an Xcode 26 theme. A small but worthwhile change in Xcode 27 is how predictive issues are displayed versus build issues. If I misspell this view, the predictive warning is now more subtle. However, as soon as I build and compile, it becomes much more obvious. Another welcome addition is a dedicated Delete Derived Data option from the Product menu. You can now clean and build a folder and delete Derived Data folder without having to go on a wild goose chase to find it. I like this new template option when I create a new file. If you search for icon, you get a template for an icon composer icon. Now, I'm not sure why I'm seeing two here. This may be a beta bug, but selecting it will allow you to save a new icon composer file to your project. And if you leave the name as appicon.icon, that will be your app icon without having to make any other changes to your project. Of course, you can open Icon Composer directly from within Xcode and add to the design. I love having the Markdown template. This is not new, but this is now incredibly useful. Let me create one, and I'm going to call it To Do. Now in Xcode 27, Markdown files render as Markdown, and you have a full WYSIWYG editor right here in Xcode. I think that this placeholder should be removed now, as it's no longer making any sense to me, but I see that it is stylized as a heading 1, so I can go ahead and change the text. You can see that I could alter the style from this menu. But when I press return, it reverts back to a body style. So let me enter some text. Let me also add a task list now. And I'm going to enter a number of tasks. This is my to-do list. This is completely interactive. My to-do list now is much better. If you right-click on the Markdown file here and choose Open as Source Code, you'll get a split pane with the raw Markdown on the left and the rendered Markdown on the right. And making edits on either side updates the corresponding view. I'll have more to show you about Markdown later in this video. There's an entirely new workflow for creating a new project in Xcode 27. From the Start window, there's a new project button. If I chose App, it creates an untitled, multi-targeted project for which you can use for experimentation. Let me switch to an iPhone preview. Notice that it is pretty bare bones. There is no asset catalog, and there's just a single file called Content View. And Content View serves as the place for everything in this particular project to test out your quick ideas. You get the app entry point, you get a simple view struct, and a view preview, but you also have a playground macro here. And this can be confusing since we now get two previews in our canvas. So you might want to add a title for one of the views like playground to distinguish it from the other. Now this project is currently stored in a temporary location. However, if I choose to save it, I can give it a name and a location. And when I do that, it relaunches with the project perfectly renamed. But again, you'd have to add your own asset catalog and your app icon and any other resources you might have. Now, you don't have to go to the Start window or the Start screen to create a new project. You can just choose File, New, New Project, or as I do, Command-Shift-N on the keyboard. Now, if you want to use the project template picker like we have in previous versions of Xcode, you can find it here and you'll get that familiar UI that you're used to. Similarly, you could create a standalone playground file here just by choosing it. Now I can right click here and I can see that it is actually stored in my library deep down in an untitled files folder. And I'm assuming that if I don't save this, it will get deleted or purged. Now let me show you what I really like about Xcode 27, and that is the ability to open any Swift file in Xcode without it being in a project. Here on my desktop, I have a file on its own called Canvas Preview Demo. And because it's a Swift extension, when I double click on it, it opens in Xcode. And you can see that this defaults to a Mac target and displays the view in its own canvas. This is not part of any project itself. I can change the preview here. And this may be a beta issue, but it was taking a long time to load the new preview for me, until I also changed this from a Mac here to an iPhone. Still, I think this is pretty useful for sharing simple Swift files with others. Here's another Swift file, but it's a playground file using the playground macro. So if I double click to open it up, the preview canvas here is the playground. And this is great because I can now keep standalone files like this around for some of my extensions that I use often and enter different texts for the playground. Now, if you follow my channel, you'll know that I'm a huge supporter of Markdown and an application called Typora. So here's a blog post that I wrote in Markdown that will be coming out sometime soon. This Markdown file includes images stored in this asset folder. Now, if I right click and choose Get Info, I can see that Typora is my default app for MD files. So if I double clicked, Typora would open. Now, I could change this to Xcode 27 though, and I actually could make it the default to open MD files, or I could have just right clicked on the Markdown and chosen Open in Xcode. Regardless, no matter what I do, when I double click on this file, it's now going to open in Xcode 27, and I can see that it renders nicely for me. I can right click and choose Show Source to see the raw Markdown. And of course, I can toggle back again. But I can also choose to add an editor pane on the right. And then I can choose one of the panes to use raw Markdown. I still like Typora better, but this is a great feature. It means that I can more comfortably share Markdown files with people and know that they'll be able to open them in Xcode 27 and see the rendered version. And finally, let me show you now how, even if I have installed macOS 27 like I have here, I can still use Xcode 26. You can see in my applications folder that I've got Xcode 26, but if I double click on it, I'm told that it is not supported by this version of macOS. But if I right click and choose Show Package Contents, and then navigate to the macOS folder, you'll find the executable. So if you hold down the Option and Command keys and drag this out onto the desktop, it will create an alias, and then you can double click to launch from here. It first opens a terminal session, but eventually Xcode 26 opens. Of course, if you try to open an Xcode 27 project, you won't be allowed. But you're able to open a project created before Xcode 27, like I'm doing here. It just works. Remember, though, that you'll not be able to submit apps via App Store Connect if you build them while running macOS 27 until it's out of beta, even if you are running Xcode 26. So that's it for this video. But there's still a lot more to cover with respect to Xcode 27 and related tools. In the next video, I'll be covering Device Hub, which replaces the old simulator application. And then I'd like to follow up by doing a video on the power of agentic coding in Xcode 27, and also use it to create a Mac application, which will be a developer tool that I've been wanting to create. And that will be followed up by not necessarily a Xcode 27 feature, but a video showing how you can validate, sign, and notarize a Mac app and create a DMG file that is also signed and notarized so that you can share it with your friends outside of the App Store. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. And also, please check out my website. You'll be able to search my full collection of YouTube videos and watch them in line. You'll also find all of my apps, not only those on the App Store, but also the free ones available on Gumroad and GitHub. And finally, you'll discover my blog posts, also fully searchable by title or keyword.